Welcome everybody to the second episode of Crappie Talk TV. Scott here with you. I hope everybody's getting along without too much trouble. Praying for those who have gotten sick, and hope those who haven't gotten sick don't get sick. So we're working on our social distancing today. So again, I'm going to do it from the courtesy of my truck. So I know today we were supposed to talk about rods, reels, lines, those kinds of things. So we're actually going to postpone that, not because of the virus, but we're going to postpone that episode till hopefully next week. We'll get to do that. So today we're going to talk about something that, a lot of crappie fishermen run into, a lot of crappie fishermen know a lot about, but some still don't. And know the particulars of it, and that's fishing brush. Now, you say, wow, Scott, fishing brush is fishing brush. Well, not exactly. Certain brush is fished certain times of the year, and then you need to kind of change your tactics a little bit and roll into a different kind of brush or structure at other times of the year. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about kind of how to approach that with your boat, how to approach different kinds of brush with your boat. And then we're going to kind of talk about some of the gear that we use when we're fishing these different types of structures. So we're going to kind of start in the deeper water and kind of work our way into the shallower water. So in the wintertime, most of our fishing here in Northeast Oklahoma, we're going to be fishing in deeper water in the wintertime. We're going to fish in that 20, 25 foot of water. Doesn't mean they're not suspended shallower than that sometimes in that water depth. But that's kind of our full depth of range that we're going to fish is 20 to 25 foot. Now, we're going to be fishing big brush piles in the wintertime using, 1 to 2, jigs at a time. But we're also going to be using, a lot of times we're going to be using like a 10 foot rod. And the reason that we do that, even though we may be fishing vertically below the boat, and that's part of, kind of rolls into how you get your boat situated, is we don't like to get right over the top of a brush pile. Okay, we want to keep that brush pile just a little bit in front of the boat, just right in front of that boat. And reason being is we don't want to blow over that boat and then have to come back or to turn a big circle, reposition. So anytime we know where a brush pile is, whether we have a waypoint set or we have a natural marker on the bank or something, we always go slow. Okay, whether we're using live scope, down imaging, side scan, traditional sonar, we're always slow rolling up to that brush pile. Now, if we're in an area where we don't know where a brush pile is, and maybe we're trying something new and we're looking, then that's one thing. But we never want to use the trolling motor right over the top of the brush pile or past the brush pile, because we don't want to allow any possibility of being any back blow from the trolling motor into that brush pile. So we're always going to put nose into the wind. If we're going to be sitting on a brush pile, we're going to be going nose into the wind. And we're going to stay a couple foot off the top of that brush pile, and then use our rods to get down there to it. Now, a lot of times just depends on where or what kind of brush pile it is based on what we're seeing. I would suggest using a little bit heavier action jigging rod. If you're going to use the jigging rod, or maybe even like a medium light action if you're using like a 7.5 footer, something like 7.5 footer. Simply because if you catch a big fish in one of these tight knit brush piles, then you're going to need some ponies. You're going to need some horsepower in your rod to be able to horse your fish out of that brush pile where they don't get you tangled up. And so as we transition and that water temperature warms up, as we transition into what I would call not necessarily the pre-spawn, But what I'd like to call the stages of pre-spawn, okay, that's when they're starting to come up and out of that deeper water, come into shallow water, even if it's for a short period of time in the day. That's when things kind of start to get a little different. Now, that doesn't mean we may not fish, brush piles in, let's say, 17 to 20 foot of water. We still may do that. But as they continue to kind of, I don't want to call it carousel, but as they start to move up in general, then a lot of times we start to fish standing timber. Okay, we find the fish in that 12 to 15 foot of water, and we're fishing standing timber, because as those fish start to move up, they get to a point where they do start to kind of spread out a little bit. So instead of finding maybe 10, 15, 20 fish in a brush pile, you find 5, 6, 7, 8 on a standing tree, okay, or some standing timber, or a big stump. Now, a lot of times we found that they actually cling to your smaller diameter trees more so than a big old stump. And so we'll start fishing that standing timber. Okay, we go through there just using our long poles, our 10, 12 foot poles, and start weaving our way through our timber. Now, there again, we're putting our nose of the boat into the wind, and we're working it that way because it's a whole lot easier to control that boat with the wind coming at you, blowing you off of that tree, versus the wind coming at your butt, wanting to blow you into that tree, and you're sitting there catching fish, and next thing you know, you're both either looking down at the live scope or looking down at your line in the water, and then boom, next thing you know, you bump the tree, scare the fish off, now you got to move on to another tree. So we always use the wind. Now, if there's no wind, then you just got to be a little more careful. But if there's ever a little breeze or a wind, we use that to our advantage and use that to keep us off of the structure. If the structure is out of the water, we'll use that. We'll use the wind, use Mother Nature to our advantage to keep our boat off of that structure. Okay? Now, as the fish move up into spawn water, okay, now not all crappie are going to spawn in like 2-3 foot of water, but the majority do. Now, as you're moving up, like right now here in northeast Oklahoma, the lakes up are up pretty good because of the rain we've had the last couple of weeks, or at least the last 10 days. So we've got a lot of buckbrush that's flooded. We've got a lot of hard ground that's flooded. Now, as long as the lakes stay relatively where they're at right now, and they're not letting just gobs of water out, then yes, the crappie will resettle. They'll go up in there, and they'll lay their eggs. So I advise you to fish that buckbrush. A lot of times we'll go down during the spawn on like Lake Fork down in northeast Texas, and we'll put our waders on, and we'll actually walk the banks with a jigging pole and just a jig, and jig in and around all that buckbrush and pull out some toads. I got a cousin that has a lake house down on the lake, and so we'll just throw our waders on and go a walking. And really just, you're just dragging a stringer full of fish behind you, and you're just tearing them up right in the buckbrush. But anytime there's flooded brush, that is a protectant for crappie. Always got to remember, crappie are an aggressive fish species, but because they are and they know it, they know they're on the bottom scale as far as overall size, they still got to hide from bass, they still got to hide from catfish, they still got to hide, they still hide themselves. And that's bass hide, catfish hide, they all hide. Whether it's from something or they want to, whether it's taking a rest or whatever it may be, that's why they get into brush piles. That's why bass will suspend next to a log. That's why catfish get into holes. And a lot of that is ambush points as well. So just remember that. Just remember, as they get into that, any kind of brush you can see on the bank, even if it's just like the bottom of a tree, can make a difference. You know, there's spots on the lakes that we fish that, yeah, I mean, we go straight to a formed structure under the water that we know is there, and you can catch 20, 30 fish off of around that in a decently small to, you know, decent area around that brush. And so, you know, just keep that in mind. When you're fishing these spawn fish. Now, if you're back out in a little deeper water, we were talking about in like standing timber, you know, I would pay attention to your locators. Pay attention to how many fish you're seeing in that depth, and just pay attention as you go from deeper water to shallower water, or shallow water to really shallow water, and just pay attention, see where the biggest concentration of the fish are, because 9 times out of 10, those are going to be your active fish. But a lot of times, especially to those who have live scope, you know, those single fish that may be moving up, those are fish that can be caught. Those are fish that are active fish. They're moving up. So a lot of times those are fish you can take advantage of and really take advantage of catching some big fish on the move. You know, in our experience, we generally catch our biggest fish as far as spawn fish kind of dead right in the center of the actual spawn. You know, there's been years where we've caught them up in 2-4 foot of water. You know, we've caught some, you know, but we've caught them kind of early, and some, you know, and it was kind of mixed bags, you know, like 10-inch fish, 9-inch fish, and then we catch some that were 13, 14 plus inch fish. So, and there again, especially around here with the rains we get and the weather we have, you know, hitting the spawn it's tough, because of the rains we get. You know, sometimes we get lucky and the rain pushes off, or we don't have any rain coming up. The water temperature, just like yesterday, Thursday, was a record high day in March for us. It was 94 degrees yesterday. It's going to be 80, mid 80s today, and then I think it's still going to be in the 70s now, they're saying, over the weekend. So we're definitely going to get the old boat out, and we're going to go catch some crappie in the morning. And we'll get y'all some video of that. But so just be aware, and like always, I always say, just pay attention to your locators as far as how many fish are you seeing in certain depths of water. And that's how you follow. That's the best way to follow those fish up into shallow water. Is to just pay attention where you've been fishing before. How many fish were you seeing relatively in that depth of water? And then you might have to move up. Man, that doesn't look too good. Move back down. It just depends on the weather, depends on what's going on, to be able to get a full good grasp on what is truly going on. So that that's just fruit for thought right there. So thank you guys for watching today. We'll get you another episode posted up next week. We might throw one here over another one in this weekend of our trip tomorrow. Don't know where we're going to go yet, but we're going to go somewhere. We're going to get some lines wet. We're going to try to go catch some slabs. So y'all stay tuned. Tentative next week, our show, we are going to try to do our rod and reel show next week. If that doesn't work out, then we're going to have something else for you. So, and we're going to kind of follow this as the season goes on, just kind of give you current tips to kind of help you guys go out and catch fish. So, hey guys, thanks for watching Crappie Talk TV. Like before, comment below, go with some questions. If you got any questions about anything, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. Thank you guys. God bless, and y'all take care.